Hello, everybody. So it's officially time to start. So I guess we can begin. There's probably going to be more people that will be joining us here, but thanks everybody for coming on and being such punctual witches and wizards out there. I know when you live in the sphere of infinite space and time, clock time can be a little bit encumbering. So it's great that you're all here on time. It's amazing. It's a miracle. We're all in different places, and we're all gathered here today to talk about this not only niche but like extra niche subject. So really cool to be here all with you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Jake.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks.
Dad.
Glad to be here.
Cool.
Oh, you brought Neil with you? Hi, Neil.
Hi.
Neil brought
Hi.
himself with him.
Hi.
Yeah.
I brought myself.
Ah,
Oh,
wow.
nice to see you.
Yeah.
We don't discriminate against age here. I'm
Yeah.
just checking, Dad.
Jake, I
Actually,
like
you
your
know-
background.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Bringing it
Yeah,
into this too.
I made it myself.
Oh, dope.
Oh, so more people. It seems like more people are coming on. I'll just try to keep. I'm the only moderator, so I'll just try to be present to everybody that's logging on. But I thought to begin, we could just kind of go around and share a little bit about ourselves, just share our names and why we're here, like what brings us to this, what we're interested in, why we are choosing to participate in this strange gathering and to read this weird book together, and just, yeah, share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your name, and your interests regarding the group.
I can go.
Okay.
My name is Emmeline, and I am right now in Ontario, Canada. It's 11 p.m. here. I think what brought me to this group is my interest in finding out about the practices of ritualistic magic, occultism, and I think the catalyst point for me to find out about certain things was my experience at psychedelics and tripping through other realms in time, and just having that experience of seeing that visually. I wanted to dig more into the root of history of where this was coming from, and I think all of it is interconnected somehow. And one of the first people I began looking into was Damien Eccles, where I learned quite a bit from. So now when Jake put that up on an Instagram, it was just super exciting to see that there was a group of people that were interested about the same thing. So I'm just very happy to be here and collaborating, participating, and exchanging conversations here with you guys. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, great to meet you. And yeah, Damien Eccles is great. I've read all three of his books, or his books about magic at least. I really love the way he teaches and writes, and it's a cool dude.
Absolutely, yeah.
So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I can go. My name is Christy, and I'm in Michigan. And again, it's 11 o'clock here as well, so it's a little late for me, but I'm in. And I came for the same kind of reasons. And Jake, you've been posting, like, having really great conversations, and also just posting some really good literature that I've been reading, getting into. And I feel like
Cool.
I'm starting to find community and something that I've been doing for my whole life, but really on my own. So it's kind of, thank you for being a connector.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, for me, it's the same thing where, I'm really interested in this stuff. I'm really passionate about it. I read it all the time. But even being here, I'm in a primarily spiritual community, but it's more centered around kind of like yoga and the healing arts and things like that, and less about kind of esoteric spirituality, and especially not in the Western tradition. So I just wanted to bring together a group of people where we can talk about this, and this is just the start. And if we come together and we bring our minds together and do this collaborative thing, like, who knows where it can grow to, and we might grow each individually exponentially as a result of being able to bounce ideas off of each other. So really grateful that you're here.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, I'm Courtney. I'm from Arizona. I'm in Tucson. And I guess kind of the same thing as you ladies. I really am here to learn. I've kind of been, digging a little bit more into spirituality, over the last few years. And, I haven't been around very many people that are like-minded. So it's kind of cool seeing the book club. Because I'm like, I need to start reading more. I think being around, people who have a little bit more knowledge than me as well is, really cool.
Awesome. Have any of you guys read the Kybalion before? Or is this the first time for all of you? Had any of you heard of it before?
The
I've heard of
audiobook
it.
came to me not so long ago, and I listened to it halfway through, but haven't made it through yet. But it seems like it wants to be read by me.
Yeah.
So I know half of it already.
I read a version of it a few years ago that I think was a slightly more abbreviated version of it. It just had the kind of, like the 7 basic principles and then a slight explanation of those. So I think this is actually my first time reading the book in full. I thought I had read it before, but as I'm reading it again, I'm like, oh wait, maybe I only read part of it. But I mean, the beauty of it is that like the whole book can be simplified to like 1 page if you want it to be. It's just like the main 7 Hermetic principles. And then there's so much that you can get out of that. Like we could spend hours, per session just talking about each of the 7 principles if we wanted to. There's so much to be gleaned from that and so much insight just from those different principles.
Yeah, totally.
Anybody else want to introduce themselves? Don't be shy.
I'll introduce
I can go. Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. My name is Selma. This is Ray, my husband. And we're both very interested in magic, alchemy, the mystical arts. And I've read the Kybalion before, but I've never really had anyone to discuss it with. And just recently found out that Ray is interested as well. So I invited him to come join. And I know that Jake shows a lot of leadership when I see him on Instagram, and I feel like he is the embodiment of what magic can be. Putting the will over, putting your will, I don't know how to say this, but like having a will and then having the world around you sort of shape to that. But yet he's a good, kind-hearted, hardworking person. He's not just sitting doing magic and stuff magically happens. He also does a lot of work and makes stuff happen. And so I find that very inspiring. And I thought, wow, like who else would I want to study with but somebody who's an embodiment of what it is that I aspire to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
I'm Ray. I'm Selma's husband. She told me about this gathering tonight, and she had asked me if I had heard of the Hermetic Principles. And I had heard of them in passing in one of those summary type videos in YouTube. And I went through the 7 principles and I familiarized myself with what they were, but that was the extent of my dive. Sounds like a lot of really interesting stuff, but I'm sort of a tourist in this entire type of thing. But I like meeting with individuals who look into things and they're open-minded and take a look at all of the different possibilities. And I'd like to see where this goes tonight and just sort of check out, what comes out from it.
Right on. Dad, do you want to introduce yourself? I want to know why you're here.
Hi, so I'm Neil Coburn. I am Jake's dad. I am a clinical psychologist and a longtime purveyor, how do you say that? Consumer, I'll say.
Purveyor.
Purveyor, thank you. Purveyor of sort of spiritual knowledge and understanding of sort of the universal force. I'm here to, this is something I've been interested in my whole life. As a young child, I remember thinking that we are all pure energy, and that, the idea of spirit is one that is very well described in this book as being, always being, never ending. I've sort of, lived my life with a basic understanding or belief of this. And, it's fantastic to see my son embrace this as he has for many, many, many years. And we've had a lot of different conversations about this. And I thought it would be great to be part of a group of individuals drawn to this kind of exploration and transmutation. The work that I do is intended to encourage transformation of every sort. And I try to take a perspective to the work that I do that is as broad as possible, which is to really look at who we are vis-a-vis not just the universe, but the whole spiritual journey that we're all on. And I try to help people to sort of remember the truth as they move through the journey. So I'm really interested in this, and I love the fact that, I get to see my son in action, if you will. So,
Have you ever read any of the Hermetic stuff, Dad? Did you know that Carl Jung was like obsessed with this stuff?
yeah, no, I did. I knew that Carl Jung was obsessed with this. I've not read this book before, but, I was always drawn to Jung and drawn to so much of what he was interested in. And, and I've integrated my own, it's predominantly Buddhist, and Eastern philosophy in the work that I do, but, it's really interesting. I should be here today because is anybody on the call from California? What part? Where are you?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Or someone else? I'm
No.
from Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in Santa Barbara. It is the apocalypse today. So today is, yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing
with
photos.
fires?
Santa Barbara's not that bad, surprisingly, but we're very lucky. But I've
Yeah.
been seeing lots of photos and hearing from lots of people that I know across the state how horrific it's been.
Yeah,
Is it
today-
fires? What do you mean?
Yeah, today was unlike any other day, period. Today, people woke up at 7 or 8 or 9 and it was dark out. And
Wow.
it stayed dark out. Today, the entire day has been as if it's a solar eclipse, with that glow and the light and the air quality. And, I ran a group this morning with about 10 people in it, a mindfulness group I run, and everyone is unnerved, and it really has a lot to do with the overall sensitivity of our environment, and how we are absolutely attuned to nature, and many of us don't even know it until you have a day like today. And it really shakes the foundation. So it's been a very remarkable and very interesting day, particularly in light of what we're talking about. So I wanted to share that.
Wow.
Yeah, the state's on fire, period. And now so is Oregon and Washington. So things are really, there are windstorms in Utah, and it was a snowstorm in Colorado. today, beginning of September. So weird things going on.
Things are getting kind of biblical. And I mean, there is a kind of relationship between the Abrahamic religions and the Bible and stuff like that, and Hermeticism and magic. So there's definitely a relationship there. I think there's some kind of like fundamental differences between Buddhism and the kind of like Western esoteric tradition that I appreciate. The kind of Buddhist perspective is that basically life is fundamentally futile, and that our whole goal in life is to escape the kind of the wheel of the cycles of incarnation. Whereas the Western spiritual model, as through like the Hermetic tradition and magic and stuff like that, is kind of like, well, actually there is a point to existence and we can do something. It's not like we're just kind of assigned to being here, which is more of a kind of like Buddhist perspective, like the cycles of incarnation are kind of non-consensual, and then you're just kind of imposed upon this place. But rather, like, we're in the West, it's seen as we're like co-creators with reality, you know, that we're in collaboration with the God force, and that we can actually like do something here. And that's what we do as Western people, is like we create stuff, like we create like skyscrapers, and we create, you know, the great pyramids and works of art like the Mona Lisa, and like that's what we really celebrate. You know, we're a doer maker culture. And so I like the Western esoteric model. It resonates with me because it's about our agency in the world rather than, you know, it does also, I think, get to the realization of things being sort of like an illusion, or there being a lot of illusion about reality, but it's not like that's like a terrible affliction, which is I think how the Buddhist world tends to see it, but it's more like, yeah, that's true, and that gives us a lot of room to play with then.
So one thing I'd say about that is, you know, my view is we're co-creators from a Buddhist perspective as well, in the nature of karma. You know, and karma really influences what it is that we'll experience and need to experience to continue this growth and this unity with, you know, the one, the Godhead. So I think in some ways it's similar. It's not, to me, as much about escaping as
Well,
evolving.
I just think there's like fundamental differences when it comes to, from a cultural perspective. Like in Tibet, if you have good karma means like either being born into a family that sends you to a monastery, or you have just like a really deep inclination to transcend all kind of like worldly desire. Like that's good karma from if you're in Tibet or Nepal or something like that. Whereas good karma in the West is like you're born into like a rich family with means to be able to kind of like ascend the social ladder. You know what I mean? Like that's like what people think of as like good luck in Western culture generally is about like material means and our agency and being able to enact change. Whereas from an Eastern perspective, I think good luck is like how possibly removed from the world can you be, you know? So it's just like, it is ultimately the same thing. Like it's ultimately the intention, I think, in Hermeticism as well as in Eastern religions is to kind of reach some kind of unity consciousness with source or the creator, whatever it is. But it's almost like just a slight like variation, you know, whereas like the end goal is that unity consciousness when it comes to Buddhism. And with magic or Western, you know, Hermeticism, whatever you want to call it, Western esotericism, it's more like once you reach that unity state of consciousness, then you can play with that. Like you then can enact agency in the world and start to like affect things. And it's slightly different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
May I chime in right there?
Always, yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Benjamin, for all those who don't know me yet. I'm with Jake and Tosha in the Unleash Your Inner Artist course, so we know each other. And anyone who's been reading about magic and spiritual practices and stuff, should have come across the terms left-hand path and right-hand path, maybe. There's this general, maybe prejudice towards the left-hand path, that it's, kind of dark and destructive. But what it's mostly about, the left-hand path, is taking account for your own fate and being a creator of yourself, whereas the right-hand path, as I've come to know, is more about living in harmony and removing yourself and become one with a certain godhead or with universal force, as I've come to understand. But both fundamentally lead to the same thing, as Jake kind of put it. It's just different expressions of certain magical practices, where you become one with the inner God. When practicing the left-hand path, you try to embody this, you become a creator. And with the right-hand path, you also become one with the creator, but more with the universal force and merge with it. That's what I'd have to say for this certain subject. But I've also considered myself a seeker in all kinds of spiritual paths. I've been a long-term practitioner, and I've mostly been interested, when I came to magic, in the left-hand path side of things. But during the last years, I've also been interested in the other side, But I feel like my path led me to many different kind of spiritual avenues. And yeah, for some of you who are well versed in astrology, maybe my Pluto is in my 12th house, right on my ascendant, and I think this leads me to constant deconstruction of my different sets of beliefs or spirituality. So I've always been deconstructing the things around me, questioning it, testing it, and this led me to having lots of experiences in different kinds of spiritual avenues. Yeah, and I'm stoked to be here with you all and talk about the subject and meet people who are equally interested, which is kind of hard to find, especially in my region. I think I haven't met a lot of people who are being really into this stuff. So I'm very excited. Yeah, thanks for bringing this to life, Jake.
Yeah, that was a great explanation of the difference of the left and right-hand path. I've never heard it explained that way. Yeah, it's kind of like, I think, the right-hand path, if it's like Taoism or Buddhism, is more like you change your mind to being kind of, like to be happy or to be comfortable with whatever circumstances arise. So the practices are all about changing your inner state to adapt more readily to the outer world. Whereas I think a lot of the left-hand path practices are more about the opposite, which is about changing your external reality in accordance with your will to be able to sort of achieve a certain kind of like vision of what it is that you want to see realized.
Yeah, that's well summed up.
So what is the left-hand practices? I mean, what you reference Buddhism on the right-hand side? Is there a
magic, Western magic would be one, but and then within a lot of variations of that, Hermeticism also being an aspect of that, and Hermeticism and magic being kind of like really intertwined or sort of the same thing. Like magic comes out of Hermeticism. Hermeticism is older than that word as far as I know. And that kind of like, I mean, we'll talk about that because we might as well just jump into the content anyway, because that was the first aspect of this, was the introduction, and the first chapter was all about like, what is the Kybalion and where does it come from, you know? So you get this, there's a lot of kind of like mythology around it, which is that this text was born out of like Atlantis is one of the mythologies, you know. Another name for Hermes is Thoth the Atlantean, which is like, what is this kind of like, we can talk about, you know, who was Hermes? Did Hermes actually exist? There's a lot of kind of debate around that, you know. I kind of think that Hermes was sort of like a pen name for like a group of scholars and initiates that were kind of like working together and like writing under the name Hermes, and that it wasn't sort of a singular person, and that it's kind of like a mythological construct. But there's also people, especially back in the time when alchemy was going on, that like Hermes was it, you know, like the alchemists were obsessed with Hermes and revered Hermes and his teachings, and all of the quest to discover the philosopher's stone and what people were trying to do in alchemy came out of the Hermetic texts, you know. So there's kind of like this tradition of Western esoteric spirituality that you could say goes back to Atlantis, if that's a belief that you subscribe to, but at least goes back to ancient Egypt, follows its way through ancient Greece and Rome, and then, you know, merges with the kind of the, you know, and then takes root in esoteric Judaism, which then takes root in Gnostic Christianity, and then carries onwards. And then there's kind of like a revival of it in the Renaissance with the people becoming interested again in Hermeticism and exploring magic. You get people like John Dee. And then after that, there's this sort of like French occult revival with people like Eliphas Levi. And then that influences the 19th century occultists, people like Aleister Crowley, who were exploring all this stuff, but then merging a lot of also influence. And there's like this whole revival of ancient Egyptian stuff, like people were discovering all this new stuff about ancient Egypt, and that really influenced people's worldviews. And that kind of like carries on into, you know, the modern day with occultism as it exists now. So that's sort of like a really brief kind of overview and history of the kind of Western esoteric spiritual tradition, which has always been sort of underground. And there's been a lot of religious persecution against it too. Like the church was literally, you know, burning people at the stake for being into this stuff, you know, and that's happened. So that's why, for example, a lot of the alchemical stuff is really codified, you know, because if people were actually saying just outright in clear language what they believed, then they would have been killed, because it was really counter to the power that the church held. And that was like in the, you know, I don't know exactly, but the 16th century or something like that, where like people did not speak out against the church at all. Like it just wasn't something that you could do.
Wow, that was quite a flow now. But to also answer your question, Neil, what kind of practices or belief sets are attached to the left-hand path, for example? I often feel Luciferianism is attributed to the left-hand path, which isn't necessarily a destructive path. As far as I'm concerned, I got to know it, it's more about certain Promethean figures or Luciferian figures, which were kind of the light bringers of wisdom, like Prometheus, who stole the fire from the gods to bring alive humanity with wisdom and the fire of wisdom, similar to Lucifer, who wasn't regarded in Christian belief sets, mindsets, as a good or benevolent figure. Hello?
It's cool now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, who wasn't regarded as a benevolent figure in Christian belief or mindsets. But in the Luciferian mindset, it's the rebel who rebelled against the system, who rebelled against the establishment, so to say, and bringing the light of rebellion and forging your own fate, basically. That's what mostly is connected to the left-hand path, which basically means you take your own fate in your own hand and try to shape it according to your will. So basically, anything magical which implies creating your own world could be considered left-hand path because it reinforces the inner God, your own inner creator. Whereas right-hand path is more like Buddhism, becoming one with an outside external world and having this inner mindset change. So also Goethean magic could be considered left-hand path, maybe alchemical practices to evolve. That's basically what left-hand path means. And the term left-hand path, funnily, is derived from Hinduism. I don't know the exact wording right now. I have it in some book. But in old, Indian practices of cleaning your butt, you lose the left hand.
Right.
So a left-hand path was basically a mocking term from ancient Indians because you wipe off your butt with your left hand, with the unclean hand. It's kind of the unclean path, which basically is them saying you're full of shit. Yeah, but it's well established now, and I more think of it like in terms of balance. You have the right hand path and you have the left hand path. I personally, made it my own task to balance them out.
See, the
Take
middle
the
one.
best of both worlds. Yeah, go the middle path.
And to me, that sounds like it has a lot to do with agency and sort of like effective capacity. You said to project one's will onto the outside world. And, I think this is quite intertwined with the Western tradition, not only of magic, but also of our sort of approach to nature. If you look at the gatekeepers, so to say, of the esoteric practice, the Masons, they're a large part of the whole gig was, guarding the secrets of architecture, of the stone, and how they went about and made what they made. But likewise, I think that this is quite intertwined into Western science also. That is, trying to best understand these forces and the components of the natural world so as to manipulate them towards a certain goal, towards a certain end. I'm just, I wonder if there's sort of an ideological, if you will, connection between these old magic practices and our current sort of scientific paradigm.
There's a really awesome Terence McKenna lecture about Hermeticism and alchemy that's like 5 hours long. And it's kind of like a divergence because he normally talks about, the psychedelic experience and psychedelic history and stuff. But like this 5-hour lecture on Hermeticism and alchemy is great. And one of the things that he said was that these ideas and practices were considered dangerous because at the time, with the establishment of the Christian church saying that the only way to access God was through them and through kind of a severe system of regulations, that like thinking of yourself as being at one with God and having sort of creative power was just it would undermine everything that they were enforcing as their kind of like system of control. And I think what's cool is when you start to get into this stuff and you get into the mythology of it, you see that a lot of the things that people say are sort of like good or evil or right and wrong is more like opinion. And a lot of it is are symbols that are trying to sort of guide people towards particular modes of conduct. So for example, the mythology of Lucifer basically recognized his own creative power and his own agency that was outside of the control of the demiurge, as they call it in Gnosticism, which the demiurge is sort of like the god daddy. That's like, you do this, and if you don't do this, I'm going to spite you, which is like the Christian God. Well, in Gnosticism, which is actually supposedly what Jesus taught, they don't actually see that as God. They see that as like a false entity that's sort of like taking power to control people. And Lucifer kind of wasn't willing to submit to the authority and just be submissive to the Godhead, not the Godhead in the kind of like Hindu sense, but the Godhead, like the head God daddy. And so he saw his own creative power and his own creative agency. And so he was demonized. He was cast out of heaven, and he was considered evil. Therefore, it's really that story is really a way of saying, you better listen to what we, the church, say, otherwise we're going to punish you. And it's like a subtle form of brainwashing then that keeps people under a certain kind of control and keeps people limited in their own abilities to enact change. I think that the kind of like magical perspective and why it was mostly underground for most of its time is that we actually are at one with God, and that we have as much creative agency and power as anybody, that there's no like priest, there's nobody that has any more creative power than we do, because we're all infinitely powerful, because we're all an aspect of that creative source. And knowing that, then we have agency to affect the world around us.
So that brings me to what you just said. Reminds me of the polarity part of the book, for example. I just want to quickly mention that I want to share. I had a 5-MeO DMT experience where I was kind of looking into that polarity, where in front of me there was God, but he was also the devil, and the devil was God. It was that the whole cycle of the light and the dark. And so when you said that, it reminds me of that through the years, through time, through generations, we've learned religions from the East, Hermetic Principles and things like that, but it's kind of been like a broken telephone system where we don't necessarily can know everything, but just the simple understanding that everything energetically acts in dualism and polarity. We all have, and all belief systems have the same core values, to let go of the ego and try to live more in the balance of the negative and the positive. And one of the things that on the book that I wanted to kind of hear the perspective of everyone is I'm just going to read 3 lines. It says, an understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. So I kind of wanted to ask you guys what you guys thought about that, because one of the things that Damien Epple talks about is the point of being human is to reach divinity and then spread those rays out to mankind. Do you think that's kind of what the purpose of all this is, in these studies and the history and encompassing all religions together, like the root of everything?
Yeah, I have something to say on that. Because of the power of our energy and the way that it can transform not only ourselves but other people. For example, if you have a room full of people and everybody is calm, doing what they are doing amongst themselves, and one person walks into that room with an extreme amount of stress, then that stress radiates out into that entire room. And so the power to change yourself and your power to change other people can happen in a negative way, but it can also happen in a very positive way. Whereas you might see somebody that walks in the room beaming and lighting up, and that energy is absorbed by everyone else. I just believe in the shifts of energies, and those energies essentially can change yourself from within, but whatever it is within you will connect to other people, and so it will shift in them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear stories about like you know, like Ram Dass's guru and stuff like that, where like he didn't really do anything, he just kind of like sat around, but like that was enough, just himself being, and that people would get around him and feel totally transformed just to be in his presence. I guess that is like the ultimate goal, really, you know, to get to such a level of you know, like advancement or realization that just by being around people you can affect them in a positive way. And that's also the principle of vibration, which they talk about in here, which is kind of like if you if you play a sound and you have like a guitar sitting near your speaker, like the guitar strings start to vibrate also. It's like there's resonances. And so our kind of vibration, our energy that we're putting out creates resonances, and it finds resonances. And it's not going to be in harmony with every energy, but it's going to also, but it's going to find the ones that it is in harmony with and vibrate with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting. I had an experience with somebody recently who we did this like peyote ceremony together, and it was somebody I'd never met before. And at the end of it, at the completion, she came up to me and she made a comment about how she recognized from the beginning of the ceremony this very like strong light coming from me, like an aura, and she didn't want to talk to me because she was intimidated by it. And she said she didn't really recognize what it was until later, because then she like thought about it, and that's something that she does, is she'll run away from it. And it sat with me for a long time, because I thought that's so strange, you know, why, you know, but at one point, in one side, that's kind of a compliment, you know, but at the other point, like, that's really sad. And then I came to realize that we only can recognize what we are. And so essentially she is that bright light, and she can only recognize that within me because she has it within her. Because you can't recognize something that you're not familiar with. It would just be foreign. She wouldn't have a word for it. She wouldn't understand it. And so, or maybe you could even, you know, recognize it then. But essentially what I came to, my belief that I came to have about that was that it essentially has this light. Maybe she's running away from it, but she does have it, and that's why she can recognize it within somebody else. Yeah. Anyway, I don't really know where I was going with that, but I found it really interesting and I wanted to share.
I think it's also important to look at, you know, the context of this book, you know, the all mind, you know, it's, everything is in and from the mind, you know, that everything emanates from what the mind does and how the mind perceives, and you know, the influence of the mind as a, you know, a vibrational force. I know I say this to Jake in the work that I do, and I'm very focused when I work with clients, and frequently I'll make a reference about something that is odd. Like, for example, the other day, I just happened to say to a client, have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning? And she said, "Oh, you mean this book?" You know, and it was sitting out of sight, completely out of sight, you know. And that happens frequently with me. And it's because it's sort of like a one-mindedness, you know, when you talk about, you know, sitting with a spiritual leader or sage, the energy of which just has an impact on your vibrational frequency, right? It just completely changes your experience. So I think we're constantly in flow, in this energy flow, and how we vibrate and the effect that it has on the people near us, and you know how we can influence that. But I think for me, we have to get to I'll just use language like a grounded place, an open place to tap into that vibrational element, to be able to connect. And that is what connection is. I'll just say one more thing that Max, you were talking about the natural order of things. And I remember being very influenced years ago. I read Michener's The Source, which is a really interesting novel. And it's a novel about the development and the history of religion, starting from cave dwellers. I don't know if anybody's read this book. It's a really interesting book. And it takes place based on an archaeological dig. And they take the oldest items and they place you in that time period. And this was the moment at which cave dwellers, who were hunters and gatherers, made a decision. A decision is an important word. It was a conscious effort to say that they were going to plant a crop. So to me, this was sort of remarkable to think about, that at one point in human history, a consciousness evolved that said, we're going to be active and plant a crop as opposed to gathering a crop. And they did. And they were terrified. They were terrified at having done this because they were concerned about disrupting the natural order of things. This is really an amazing mindset, you know? And as a way to essentially appease the gods, whatever that really meant, they created an offering. They said they would give a portion of what they had grown as a way of trying to make sure they didn't upset the order of things. To me, it's so many fascinating aspects to that story.
Yeah, it's really relevant to what we were just talking about with the difference between Western and Eastern kind of like philosophies, or even just that the kind of Christian, like the standard Christian worldview, as opposed to like the magical worldview, is the same kind of thing, where, you know, the magician is planting the crops, so to speak. It's like the magician says, I have agency as a creative being in the universe. And that is really antithetical to what a lot of the sort of dogmas and systems would want us to do, and have really tried to get us to not do that for a long time. I wanted to propose, just as, can I just say one thing? I wanted to sort of propose as like a structure. How would you guys feel if we sort of like went in a slightly linear fashion? And like, I love where all the conversation is going, but if we kind of like discussed the material sort of chapter by chapter, and like in the subjects that were directly related to each of the chapters, and then afterwards we can kind of like extrapolate from there and just see where things go. How do you guys feel about that?
I like it.
That's good.
Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, because like I just want to make sure that we cover the kind of material of the book first and foremost, and it's, you know, like only 3 chapters, so it's not that long. But then afterwards, like I have, you know, all the time in the world to go into all different subjects related to it. So the introduction is really just about the Hermetic teachings, Hermes  and where the kind of source of this stuff comes from. And then the first chapter goes more in depth into that, into where the sort of history of the Kybalion, and it also proposes the axiom, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. So maybe we can start by just talking about that. Like, how many of you had heard of Hermes Trismegistus before? And what do you think of the story of Hermes, and who is Hermes to you?
I was kind of vaguely familiar with him, but I thought it was really interesting that he's kind of seen as a mystical and spiritual figure in both Egyptian and Greece philosophy. I kind of think of those cultures as being, quite separate. So I was vaguely familiar with him and Hermetic philosophy. And one of the reasons why I wanted to join this book club is because I really wanted to explore some of the ideas. I was familiar with his principles, but I hadn't done too much reading, things like that. So yeah, that was my impression.
I kind of doubted the historical. I questioned the historical authenticity of some of this. With more specifically with this notion of a lot of Eastern tradition coming from him specifically. But I don't think that really matters too much, because I think he's more of like an archetypal figure. Like the archetypal shaman, teacher, the master of masters, as he's called. So I think it can be sort of held in the same regard as Jesus. You don't necessarily need to take it word for word that he existed and did those exact things, but I think there's something to be said about the figure and what he's teaching, so to say.
It's a
And
little.
Jake, you had alluded to him possibly being a group of scholars and it being symbolic. And I think something that might allude to that is, I believe they say he lived to be 300, which, as we know, a lot of people, no one in the modern era lives to be 300. So that might be a symbol or a reference to that it was not an actual person, but maybe a group of scholars, or an allusion to something like that.
Right. The name Hermes also, it comes from, I think, the Greek god Hermes, who's the god of communication and knowledge. And there's like various correspondences. So like in Roman mythology, that would be Mercury. In ancient Egypt, it's Thoth. They're like these different archetypes that represent the fountainhead of wisdom and knowledge, and things like communication and writing, which at the time was still seen as being very magical because it was like a relatively new invention and culture. And so, yeah, I do think that the name is kind of like a reference to a particular kind of like a quality, It's sort of like we deify things culturally. So we have like Master Yoda, right? And like we might sort of write things from the perspective of Master Yoda, and everybody knows who that is. And then 300 years from now, they discover the writings of Master Yoda, and then they're like, oh yeah, Master Yoda, he was like the great master of these times and whatever. But it's like, no, it wasn't actually like a real figure. It was a character that represented an archetype that, that embodied the master or something. I think like Hermes is kind of the same. It's totally possible that there was a real Hermes that was a survivor after the flood of Atlantis, and then brought the knowledge and wisdom of all these different sciences to ancient Egypt. And it's totally possible, but I think more likely it is kind of like just like an archetype, a kind of characterization of different qualities and that that were looked at that represent things like wisdom and understanding and knowledge.
It was confusing. It was confusing to me to try to make sense of a reference about the possibility that Hermes was a teacher to Abraham, or a guide to Abraham, and that I wasn't quite sure how to sort of make sense of that reference in regards to his existence. And I wondered if anyone else picked that up or had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I saw that, and it brought up a couple of ideas that I had read in the Bible itself. And the way I typically reconcile stuff like that is that it doesn't really matter too much to me whether it's fact or whether it's a little on the fiction side. What really matters to me is, where does it take me? How does it help me? What practical things can I derive from it? And how can I build on that going forward? So a lot of the books, the great books that have been written, if you're one of the faithful, God bless, and you take it the way that you take it with the belief system that you have. But for myself, how I reconcile it is, how does it help me? How does it help life as I'm living it now? Was it a real person? Are they describing the person in a very accurate way? Maybe yes, maybe no, but who's to say? That there's no one alive that can verify one way or the other. So to me, the real question always is it practical? Is it helpful to my life going forward? What can I draw from that? And fiction can do that even. Jules Verne, inspiring lots and lots of people to create technology that wasn't dreamed up prior to that. And it's fiction, but at some point it can become reality, depending on how the right person obtains the information and applies it. So that's my viewpoint on how I looked at that little piece of it.
I also want to add to that, by creating that personification of a Hermes, it gives it a sense of authority. And sometimes people need that sense of like, this really important man gave, because if it's just like a monk who's like, poor and begging for money because he took an ascetic route or whatever, people might not listen. But if it's this authority figure like, oh, Hermes, and he's triple the great, and he lived for 300 years, and he even taught Abraham, who's the father of the great Jewish religion and all of that. So that's the way I look at it, that I'm not really sure, like Ray said, one way or the other, because I wasn't there. But I see it as useful to create an authority figure where people like be in awe and listen and try to listen and try to actually learn and pay attention and not worry about judging the person. Like, who's saying this? Who's telling me this? Well, what do you know? That sort of thing.
I think one thing about, sorry, can I just say this one thing? Just about like the Abraham thing is that there were definitely Hermetic schools that existed before the existence of the Abrahamic religions. And it's totally possible, because it existed in ancient Egypt, and these schools and teachers existed, that if not like Hermes himself, it's definitely possible that Abraham was brought up in some kind of like Hermetic mystery school, or that he would have been influenced by the ideas because he would have been, I mean, I don't know a lot about Abraham, but it's possible that he was in contact with some of these ideas through ancient Egypt, or from people traveling, like traders or whatever that came into his, that crossed his path. So that's at least possible.
They practiced magic. I mean, those ancient Hebrews there's definitely magic that they practiced. And if you read through the Bible, you'll see magic all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So where did they learn it? Where did that tradition come from? Before the covenant, before they were actually Jewish. Like, where did that come from? It could have been, like you said, Egypt, and that whole Hermetic tradition.
In the context of the Bible, Abraham was like the founding father of the first tribes of humanity, as it is laid out in the Bible. So he's like the source of structured systems of humanity. And in those times, people were said to have lived up to several hundred years. So why not Hermes as well? Scholars have been questioning this, of course, several hundred years. Did they really live longer than us? Were they some kind of offspring of an older race of humans, like the Atlanteans? Or was it a different system of counting years, that people lived the same length as we do, but it was counted in very different ways, or there was another system of years, maybe. But as it is laid out in the Bible, Abraham, was counted as the founding father of humanity, basically. And by saying Hermes advised him or taught him, taught him the ancient laws of Hermeticism, it also gives this kind of thought school authority, as you already said it, Salma. Like Hermes teaching the founding father of humanity, of the first tribes of humanity. It brings a lot of authority to this school of thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely possible that people live to be several hundred years old. When you think about, like, like right now at this point in my life, I'm really into Taoism and internal medicine and all of this. And like the deeper you go, like there's so much knowledge that's been lost, and like people were way more in sync with the environment back then, and who knows like what kind of crazy shit they were into. And like there's so many methods of preserving your life force and amplifying it, and like I don't know, maybe I have no problem believing that somebody lived to be 300 years old like 10,000 years ago. Like I mean, yeah, I don't know. I find it really it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about what we've lost, and at the same time, like I like that mythology a lot, that there's a possibility that through certain practices you can extend your life to like who knows what. Yeah, that's
What do
all
you
I have.
think? What do you guys think about the idea that Hermes was some kind of like extraterrestrial? That the Atlantean society was like a metaphor for people that actually came to the Earth from another civilization that was not on a boat but like on a starship, And it's like the Thoth character, which is also an embodiment of Hermes, has like an ibis head, is like clearly not a human being. So it is also possible that this is all a metaphor and story to describe a more advanced civilization of what we would now call aliens that came back and actually influenced our human race by coming and disseminating certain technologies and certain ideas, and help see that and help see the advancement and development of our species on the planet.
I think that would explain the missing link. How we came from so many type of hominids into rapidly growing into an intellectual race of humans who are just now going to Mars, whereas before it was a very slow evolution of species. So when I hear things like that, it you never know. It could be an intervention of other life from outside this planet.
What I
Chariot of the Gods is based on that premise.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about that, I mean, I think the reason I not focused, but I was taken aback about the Abraham. Not only was he, the founder, he had a direct link and communication with God. He spoke directly to God. So the juxtaposition of him speaking to God, whatever that means, and him also being mentored, if you will, by Hermes, I just thought was really interesting, trying to, wrap my head around how that was. And maybe God was an alien. actually, landed in a spaceship. Who knows?
A lot of magical practices are about communing with and receiving information or guidance from kind of like non-corporeal entities that are either like gods or deities or angels or demons or archangels. And this is like stuff that's been taught for thousands of years. So yeah, it is possible that like if Abraham was a part of some kind of Hermetic mystery school, that the kind of stuff that he would have learned would have been how to be in contact with entities that would dispense information to him. That's like where that story exists in all religions, And then recently there's a sort of revival of that kind of storyline within psychedelic culture as well. Like Terence McKenna made that idea popular where you could take mushrooms or smoke DMT and kind of have communion with a advanced intelligence that could then give you information or blueprints for technologies and things like that. So it's just, yeah, it is possible that was exactly the experience that Abraham was having. And it is possible that there was some kind of entity like Hermes that was actually there to guide him. And I think it's possible that Hermes wasn't necessarily a human being in the same way that we are.
When I researched Atlantean things and stuff like that, I also came to the term Lemurian. The Lemurians. They existed even before the Atlanteans, and they were said to grow to a height of 10 meters or so, like not human beings. And they were also said to have psychic abilities and stuff like that, which were then passed on to the Atlanteans. So there are theories that even before Atlanteans, there was something, maybe even something alien, something extraterrestrial coming down to Earth, like the Nephilim in the Bible, the giants who were said to be a mixture of humans and these angels, angels mating with humanity, basically. Like the fall is connected, the fall of Lucifer, his rebel angels who chose to basically lay with the woman of men. Which is kind of similar or connected to that alien theory that aliens came down to Earth and merged their genes with human genes or the genes of existing animals like apes or something like that to create Nephilim, half angelic, half human, or half alien, half human, maybe.
Yeah, the difference between angel and alien is almost like semantics. Like they're both non-human intelligences that come from either another dimension or the stars, depending on your, narrative around it.
It's hard
Just
to
wanted.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say it's really hard to understand the exact meaning of things sometimes because everything, the whole secret doctrine was protected by writing any esoteric books and even the Bible in codes. So one is left trying to translate what you're trying to say. So it's just like, a matter of reflecting on what the words are saying, but we can never be 100% sure. And at one point in the book, it says, nothing was ever recorded for fear of persecution and danger to, essentially just being persecuted and outcasted by what the content is saying. So it's just a matter of interpretation, which makes it a lot more difficult, but, those are the ancient books.
I just wanted to add about Abraham one more thing. Like in Turkey, the Muslim people, they consider him their founding father as well. And there is this place, Şanlıurfa, where they say that he was born. And if we take the historical aspect of things, and if we consider that Hermes was a group of people, then in the Hellenistic era, Greece was stretched to Egypt and on the other side to Persia. And it's pretty much that actually there was a group of people who managed to teach Abraham in Turkey, because there are lots of Greek settlements and ancient places in Turkey. So for me, it's pretty much possible that he had the knowledge, or he had somebody there who taught him. And they also say that he was born in a cave. So there is this cave symbolism coming up over there as well. So, and about Hermes as well, like he is the messenger of the gods. So if we say that he's an alien, I can probably just imagine that maybe he was sent as a messenger to Earth, to us. So I just wanted to add this as food for thoughts.
Interesting.
Right on.
So
Yeah, it's all
conclusion, aliens.
just aliens is the answer
man.
to everything. It's great. Aliens are a great go-to if you don't really have a clear explanation for something. You're like, oh yeah, aliens. And then I like this, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding, because for one thing, it does denote a certain, like back in the day, this was only available to initiates. Like people would have to undergo certain ordeals to receive this kind of information. Now it's like mass published and anybody can download it off the internet. But I think that it references that, the fact that this information was only available to like a select few who were kind of seemed ready for it. And then also it speaks to perception, where, you know, you could tell a truth to somebody and if they're not ready to receive it, they can just be like, oh, I'm not hearing that, you know? That's sort of something that they say in this book, is that this is true, but yet not everybody's going to be open to hearing the truth.
That was something that I really liked that they kept mentioning in the book, that the lessons and what they're passing along with the teachings are only available to those who are ready to hear it. And I think that applies to everybody in everyday life now as well. I think as long as we remain open and we consider all angles from all perspectives, then we're going to learn a lot more lessons. And if we remind ourselves that kind of with the duality also, the same way that there's right, there's also really no wrong, because everything has two polar opposites. So staying open to the idea that everything does have an opposite end that's going to present itself right or wrong to somebody else, remains open to the idea that we might be missing out on lots of lessons depending on what we are personally ready to learn and what you believe you're ready to learn as well.
Another thing it says is the spirit of persecution has not yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings which, if publicly promulgated, would bring down upon the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement from the multitude, who would again rise the cry of crucify, crucify. So it's like, especially back when the stuff was being taught more underground, there was so much fear of religious persecution that, as you said, Emmeline, it had to be really encoded and in order to protect it. But I think even now it's like our dominant religions have strayed away from the Abrahamic religions, and it's more the kind of scientific materialist worldview where, you know, if you start talking about some kind of ancient omniscient alien who came to the earth to disseminate spiritual wisdom and truth to the human race, like you're definitely going to be mocked and scorned by most people. And if you work in a place of a public institution, you'll probably be, you know, fired from that position. So there's a lot of persecution even now, you know. And I mean, Damien Eccles is an interesting case of a kind of like genuine witch trial of somebody who was persecuted also for their magical practices, and this still exists. And yeah, and so it's also that the information is not only for those who are ready, but also those who are ready and willing to kind of protect it in a way. you know, that it's like it is an initiated few who have the capability to not only understand this stuff, but to integrate it and to use it in such a way and to pass it on that's in a way that's not going to get them or other people hurt or in trouble.
What I've been wondering, especially concerning this subject, is whether this book is written in some kind of elitist kind of way, but in the light of things you just laid out, Jake, like persecution. People had to be cautious, very cautious to not get caught talking about this stuff, or else they be burned at the stake. Or today, like the proverbial stake of being thrown out of work or out of your
shamed by your family,
society, family, yeah, whatever, witch trials, like Damien Eckert's. This is a truth. This is a dangerous possibility, yeah. But maybe there's also some kind of elitism hidden behind, you know, certain magical practices, saying, yeah, we are the only ones capable of harnessing this kind of knowledge and wisdom. And I'm always wary of that, you know, because it's permeating so many groups of people or faiths or whatever. This kind of elitism, basically saying we're the best, fuck the rest. And I've been wondering, yeah. Yet at the same time, if there might be truly only a few people like us talking about this, understanding this, and we're kind of made to understand it, made to be messengers to others, a few who are seekers also. Yeah, but I'm fighting hard to really stick to one side or another of these.
Well, I mean, they say in the book also that this stuff is actually kind of like anti-elitist, that whereas other kind of schools of thoughts formed religions and hierarchies, the Hermetics never did. They never created institutions around their wisdom. They just dispensed it openly and freely to anybody who wanted to hear it. So in that way, it is kind of like anti-elitist. But I think in the modern era, yeah, there's definitely people who are going to take it and be like, yeah, like I know something secret and that makes me better than other people. And yeah, there's always that kind of trap that people can fall into.
There's also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, no, I just, based on what you're saying, the control, and there's something on the book that talks about the mastery of principle, learning how to use it instead of being used by it. And when it comes, I think it was Max that you typed something, people sometimes are labeled under a mental health condition based on, you know, things they believe or things they're in tune with that they see. The way that, one of the ways that I kind of turn what I've learned in terms of energy work into my workplace without fearing of being, I don't know, stigmatized or judged in any sense is, for example, I work as a mental health counselor, so I encounter a lot of people who are, what's it called, functioning from the ego and from conditioning and past experiences and a lot of mental turmoil. So when I implement visualization in our meditations, I do it through things that I've learned over time in ritualistic magic. So a lot of visualizations of light and going through the body. And this is what I call our wellness exercises. Meanwhile, I'm implementing this light into the people that I serve in my community. And this is kind of like the way that I use the whale or my energetic practices to help other people in hidden ways. So the
You're a
director of
secret
the mental
healer.
health services is not aware of what I'm doing, but I'm not doing it with any ill intent. I'm doing it so they develop that self-awareness, that mindfulness practices that can lead them to alleviate some of that pain that they create themselves in their minds. So there's always a way to go around it, I think. And once you become quite acquainted with the practices with consistency, it becomes almost like a download. You know, sometimes I receive these downloads, especially when I'm about to go to sleep for some reason. I feel like I'm very, very vulnerable and open at that time. And then I just get things that I need to look into, or synchronicities throughout the day, you know, jump in. And I've never in my life experienced anything like that. But I think, like I said, with the consistency and the practice, you develop these things that you can share upon other people and do it in a way that it's kind of hidden, just like the books are hidden in the language that they're provided for others to read. You can turn those into actions and provide them to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that going on my belief of it is to keep secrets, or to keep it something that you wouldn't maybe tell everybody, not everybody gets to know. I think it's more for protection rather than for an elitist ego way of doing things. And if you do see it that way, then that's enforcing evil into your spiritual realm. And so if that's what you choose to do, or if that's what you allow to happen, then that's, you know, up to you. But I think we all have that choice as an individual. And to keep it a secret for the means of protection is really just to, you know, be able to share what we decide to share with others where we know that it's safe, and not going to hurt us or bring harm to us. And so that's why you would keep it secret rather than share it with everyone. And I've seen it just recently, actually, with my mom. It was funny. She has somebody that works for her that had an employee that was going to bring another employee to work as well within the company. And then all of a sudden it shifted because the woman who was going to bring her in or recommended her said she practices witchcraft. And then all of this like gossip started about this woman, and all of this like almost hatred towards this woman who practices witchcraft started to like evolve through gossip between everybody. And I said to my mom, don't you see how much more evil it is the way that everybody's talking about this woman, versus it sounds like everybody else is doing way more witchcraft with this in an evil way with all the gossip, versus like understanding or being open to hearing somebody else's perspective. And this woman who has, you know, no involvement in any of it is really just almost a victim of it. And I hate to throw the victim word around, but anyways, a victim of it. And then I just come to mind of thinking that like, I have no idea who this woman is, but essentially she probably shared with the wrong person. And so to protect herself, maybe, you know, she will go forward just knowing that either if she does share the information, she may share it differently, or not at all with the wrong people. But not to
Do a
keep it
similar
from
thing.
people. Yeah.
That's a funny story from my high school times, you know, where I joined a group of fire artist people, you know, breathing fire and stuff like that. And we had a pentagram in our logo. And we were asked to basically play some fire on a beneficial kind of concert for our school. And all of a sudden, the promoters of our concert, they noticed in our logo that pentagram, and all hell broke loose. And we divided half of my whole also called in English language, like half of my level, grade, whatever. It was divided into half into those who supported us as artists just doing their thing, and Christians basically judging the shit out of us. And from that on, I was known as the weird Satanist guy from school. Yeah, so that's the full
You're still the
force
weird Satanist guy, Benjamin, but we
yeah,
love you.
I
It's
still
okay.
am. Thank you, thank you.
I'm just kidding.
I'm with the anonymous Satanist guys right here.
It's okay. I don't want to throw any Satanists under the bus. I mean, Anton LaVey went to my high school, so.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah.
So do you guys want to talk about the 7 Hermetic Principles? We will go through all of these each in depth, because I think that for the rest of the book, it's explaining these 7 Hermetic Principles in a really deep way. But the kind of beginning axiom is the principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key, before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. So what I thought that we could do is if we could read through these 7 principles and discuss them a little bit and kind of go into it. So the first principle is the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm going to go in a minute. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, I'm going to go in a minute because it's really late here and I have to work early, but I do want to say something about this because I feel like a lot of times I question when I'm doing like things on my own, because I love to be alone. I love to like hunker down in the house and just do my own thing. And I always wonder, like, is that affecting things on a bigger scale, or is it just affecting me, right? And so I really felt like looking over these principles, that was one thing, that a question that was kind of answered, the way that ripples out to others rather than just having to like go out and be with people. So I just was thinking about that, and I was curious if anyone had any ideas of how that related to the mentalism. And then I'll leave in a little bit, but I'm going to listen for a minute.
To me, that's kind of like the second principle, right? As below goes above, or the other way around. To me, like that principle is kind of more summing up like an individual act and like understanding if there might be like a higher manifestation of that. I think I remember watching like an interview Jake did where he said like an example of that was like institutional privilege or something like that. Is that true? That's kind of how I perceive that, but
that makes sense. And also vibration as well. I was thinking that was also a principle that went along with it, but yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me because microphone is not with me. Okay, cool. Yeah, in my understanding is the universe is a mind. So it's like we all have our own little universe within each other's mind. It's sort of a reflection of the way we think and the way we see the world. And by this, we're forming kind of our own reality. So it's like a mini reality within the whole universe, which is in our mind. My understanding.
I think that's the basic issue. You know, if the mind, in fact, is the universe, then each of us have an experience of a universe that is simply our mind. You know, and all of you are part of my mind universe, as I am perhaps, I don't know for sure, of yours, right? I mean, in essence, it is truly all in the mind, right? Everything is perceived through mind only. I mean, you can get really esoteric and say there is no reality, which is essentially talks about. It does say there's no reality other than what the mind presents, to the viewer, which is oneself. So everything is, in fact, in the mind. And even from a reality base, if you move away from this idea, the mind is so fickle. The opportunity for the mind to experience something is so easily influenced. Think about a mirage. Think about, the taste tests where people tasted yogurt in a mall that had, red coloring, and they all said it was strawberry, when in fact it wasn't strawberry at all, but there was a picture of a strawberry. So everything is mind, essentially. What else is there but mind?
I think what I really read into with this principle is that the all is mind, meaning that there's only one mind. It's not like there's a whole bunch of separate minds that we as individual selves have. It's that we're all an aspect and we're all experiencing the collective consciousness, which is unicitous, which is all one. And so when you understand that principle, that we're all perceiving as the illusion of separate selves, the interconnectedness of the universal mind, then yeah, I would say that whatever we experience as quote unquote separate entities within our own quote unquote minds, that we do have an ability to kind of influence and to intermesh with the universal consciousness. And, I'm not so familiar with this idea, but it's kind of like this idea that a person on one side of the world does something or discovers something, and then suddenly, very, very shortly after that, that was unprecedented. And then shortly after that, a bunch of people have the same kind of realization or discovery. It's like by enabling something within our individual consciousness, it ripples out and has an effect on the collective. And I think that this is also potentially one explanation of synchronicity or meaningful coincidences that occur, or sort of like psychic phenomenon that occur, is that we think and we've been taught that our minds are separate, but actually they're not.
And it's not just our minds, not just human consciousness. Animal kingdoms have been studies. They demonstrated that, they're watching a segment of, I don't know if it's the chimp population or monkey population that had for the very first time developed a new behavior on an island. And suddenly, thousands of miles away, other monkeys developed that same behavior. So the argument is, well, was that just a natural evolution that took place at the same time, or was it influenced by virtue of this consciousness?
And I think it's important to separate the ego from the mind. If you've experienced an ego death, you're very akin to the oneness of everything. And that's when you're losing yourself and just noticing that all the pattern and everything meshing together, and really removing the things that you identify as your mind are really your ego versus the actual mind itself.
Yeah, that's great.
I think what Neil was, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. What I also find interesting is how the Kybalion breaks down like matter, physical matter, into mind, basically. Laying out that science already found out that all matter basically consists of nothing. It's laid out later in the other chapters, that it's just moving particles, moving atoms. Everything's in movement. Nothing's really firm. That's all in a certain vibratory state, which basically shows that it's all of the same stuff, the same mind stuff. Yeah, that's what I wanted to throw in right there.
And nothing matters.
Yeah. Nothing is matter. All is energy. All is mind.
I think what I was going to say was that what the example that Neil gave, I think it's referred to it as the 100 monkey effect, where you have a group of local monkeys that start to mimic some behavior, and after a number of them, and 100 I think is an arbitrary number, but after some number of monkeys start to copy that behavior in a non-localized form, other monkeys around the world will exhibit that same behavior, and there's no tie-in to how they got that behavior because they couldn't have possibly seen it because they're just not near enough to the original set of monkeys that developed that behavior. And it's something that has been somewhat proven in the animal control world, where the makers of rat poison will come up with a very successful poison for the control of the rat population, and it becomes very successful. But then after a little while, none of the rats in other parts of the world will go near that poison because of the same effect. Somehow there's a universal way of sharing that information, and it does get shared, and the rats in other portions of the globe will not go after that poison. And then every once in a while, the poison has to be changed because of this effect. So it's been known in different pockets, but I don't think we've globalized it and studied it enough to take a look at where it comes from or how it functions. So there's ideas floating around about it, but I don't think we've gotten to a place where we're totally enlightened on the process.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a book called The Overstory. Overstory, it's a novel, but it's a novel about trees and how trees share a common consciousness. It's a really fascinating book, you know, and he even talks about how a particular species of trees can be vulnerable to a certain disease that will communicate to other trees in other parts of the world. It is really about a collective unconscious or consciousness, depending on how you look at it, that really is cross species or within each species, maybe not.
What was the name of that book again?
Yeah.
It's called The Overstory.
The Overstory? Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it won a Pulitzer Prize. It's really very well written. It's fascinating. It really is, just in terms of what we're talking about.
This principle is very aligned with Buddhist thought, and it's kind of what, you know, that's what the Buddha was trying to get everybody to realize, is kind of like the inherent emptiness of all matter and phenomenon, and that it's all just a perceptual illusion, which is what I think that this principle is also speaking to. So there are a lot of, I'm not going to say that Hermeticism is conflictual with Buddhism. There's a lot of like inner relationships between the two. But this principle especially, I think, is very Buddhist.
It also fits in with science, because there's this thing, I just looked it up here so I can speak more intelligently, non-locality. And it says here on physicsoftheuniverse.com, non-locality describes the apparent ability of objects to instantaneously know about each other's state, even when separated by large distances, potentially even billions of light years. Almost as if the universe at large instantaneously arranges its particles in anticipation of future events. And then there's entanglement, where when the particles get entangled, right? And then somehow they, you know, they're just one half of each other, even though they could be separated for distance. So now physics is catching up with this philosophy, which apparently the ancients knew. And then that, to me, that speaks to maybe there was some alien intelligence or interdimensional intelligence that had a more advanced understanding of, you know, the way things have been created, but spoke in metaphor and in easy to understand language. And now, you know, the physics speak in math, they speak in mathematics, but even still, nobody could tell me an algorithm, I would not understand it. So I have to read this simple little sentence here that I just read to you guys. So that was sort of.
So something that's really interesting about like physicists speaking in math is that John Dee, who's kind of like the archetypal magician wizard that supposedly Gandalf and all these characters were based off of, he was working with angels through this thing called Enochian magic. And he had the realization before this was a popular idea that God spoke through the universe as mathematics. And that was like what he got from the angels who basically told him that. And so it's really interesting. Yeah, like I think that when you really get down to it, there's a lot of similarities in perspectives, different words to describe the same ideas, whether it's physics or what we would consider scientific thought, or it's Hermeticism, or it's Buddhism. Everybody's sort of seeking an understanding of the universe, and they're arriving at the same conclusions. They're just using different words to describe it.
One of the things that always drew me to Jung, and I think this was in some ways his greatest breakthrough, is the advancing of the collective unconscious. The idea that anything that's ever been known is known. It's sort of like a stored vat of consciousness that is available to all living things if you connect into it, if you allow, it's sort of vibrational. If you allow yourself to vibrate at a frequency, it's knowable that way. And it's sort of a brilliant way of thinking about, to me, it always made sense that everything that was ever known must be knowable, that it's sort of stored in this conscious pool that we can really connect to. I think, George Lucas with the Force and clearing ourselves and grounding ourselves so we can connect to this universal force. It's all interconnected. It's just, I like what you said, Bryce, about, it's our ego that gets in the way in terms of this self-identity and this small containment that locks us in, doesn't allow us, to really be open and receive what is out there.
There's some kind of like highlighted words in this passage, and it's a spirit which is in itself unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite, living mind. So it's like, what would our worlds look like if we perceived our lives and perceived reality and existence in the universe as being a living mind that we were within? Sort of like we were dream characters within a dream that were waking up to our dream realities. It's a cool thought experiment to try to go out and actually see life and existence as a living mind that we're enmeshed in.
Yeah, we could be a cell in some massive being, and this would be our experience.
Yeah.
It's similar to what you're saying, I think.
Something else I find interesting relates to what you were saying about, Jake, with there being different ways to call the same idea. We just refer to it as different things. I had never heard of this book or Hermes or the 7 Principles or anything, but I realized when reading them, I feel very familiar with all 7. So I think that it goes in to say that and also goes to being aware and learning what we're open to learning. It also just refers to what we call it and how we choose to follow it under, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's all connected and it all is the same. It just depends how we reference to it and how we decide to follow it or live by it.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that too. I agree with that. When we were talking about I forget what we were exactly talking about, but what I was going to say before is it's a way of being. Oh yeah, it was when we were talking about the privacy. Do we talk about it? Don't we talk about it? And I was thinking, it can be a way of being and a way of being in the world and seeing the world, like a worldview, a paradigm, I think is the word. And so you don't need to go around saying to everybody, oh, but yes, as above, so below, blah, blah, blah. You're just the way you're like being in the world. And it just comes out through your behavior, through your thoughts, through your actions, through how you manifest, and how you treat other people, how you treat other creatures in the world and everything around you. And then if somebody eventually you're gonna sort of attract people who are like you when you're being that, when you're aligned with your with your beliefs and your behavior and sort of thing. You'll meet people and then you could probably talk to them. I would never probably confide in somebody at work, but just as a friend and stuff like that. I think that, like we're speaking with one another openly, and I'm not afraid of you guys and stuff like that. So it just will naturally unfold.
Totally. I think that, was it Tim Leary who said, find the others? I think that's what we're all doing here. We're trying to find the others. Other people have had these like weird thoughts and weird ideas that are less popular, but seem really important to us. I think that that's also excellent because you mentioned the principle of correspondence, which is as above, so below, as below, so above, which is the next principle for us to discuss. This kind of idea of the microcosm is the same as the macrocosm. If you look at like neurons in a human brain, how it really closely mimics the galaxies and star formations, or how a cell is very similar to a solar system. All these different kinds of things that we've observed through scientific view. But what do you guys think about this? There's so much we can derive from this simple statement. So much to contemplate.
I think it's a great way, what he was saying in the book, is a great way to be able to understand things that we don't have access to understanding. If we have that belief, I guess it is, that the macrocosm is a microcosm and microcosm is a macrocosm. If we have access to one of them, we can study it, and then we can model from that we can actually see and study. We can model the stuff that we can't see, and then so in magic we can use that to create our visions and our structures in that aspect of the hidden and the unseen, and maybe even create like our futures. Maybe even have control over our futures based on the structures that we understand, and we want to project that into a space that we don't know, an uncertain space. I also see just like a very, very tangible example within myself. If I feel chaotic, if I'm emotionally chaotic for an extended period of time, my outside world becomes chaotic. There's messes all over. I can't organize. I can't keep anything straight. I can't find stuff. And so instead of saying, I'm going to organize stuff around me, it's just not going to happen. I have to clean up I have to do my inner ecology. I've got to recenter and ground. I've got to root and ground. I've got to do that whole thing that we do. That you guys are probably aware of, connecting the sky and the earth and all that stuff. And then once I'm settled within myself, it's almost like magic. Almost I can straighten up, organize. I can do pretty much anything that I want to do in my outer world. But if I'm not squared away within myself first, it's very difficult for me to manifest that in the outer. So that's almost like as within, as without, as without and stuff like that. And then it's sort of cyclical, because then I see the mess outside and then it creates this mess within. So I really have to isolate myself and do my meditation and just be very serious about it until I can, come back to center.
Building on what Selma said,
yeah, keep going.
Building on what Selma said and just taking it in a slightly different direction, it all feels very architectural, in that if you, however it got created, if you create a good pattern, you can mimic that pattern and create other patterns on top of that pattern, but they all have a lot of similarity to them as part of the architecture. So it just kind of makes sense that way.
Pattern seems
Yeah.
like an important word, and it kind of is like how you can observe the fractal growth in nature as being universal. Like, even though there's differences between an ant and a leaf and a person, they all grow upon the same geometric principles.
Right.
And it's also this idea, it ties in with the principle of mentalism as well, because there's a lot of, I think that there's a lot of room for discussion when it comes to, is the universe within us or without us? And it's like, we have the universe within us. We have access to the universe through our minds and through our imaginations, but yet we're also a part of the larger universe outside of us. And anything that is a manifestation in the material universe outside of us originates from a place within us, within our own mind. So it's also that system of correspondence where it's like a feedback loop from internal to external, etc., ongoing.
That's what I wanted to say. When adjusting the external, for example, creating clarity around your workspace can probably immensely help you regain some inner clarity, as we had in our Unleash Your Inner Artist in the one chapter of The Artist's Way, where it recommended clearing your space, just bring in some order, some clarity, and clarity within you will follow also. It's like that feedback loop. And there seems to be no line to draw. It's one constant feedback loop of the internal creating the external and the external reinforcing the inner. Maybe even it changes with all internal changes. Like, for example, certain circles of friendships or social circles, they can hold you down in a certain space, maybe even negative space, a negative mindset, and you stay there when you stay in the group. So you either leave the group and gain a different inner mindset, or maybe it changes all by itself. When you change your inner mindset, you automatically part from these kind of people. I found it hard to draw a line there. What came first? Was it the mind? Was it your mindset? Or was it adjusting your external circumstances?
Yeah.
So for me, I consider the larger context. Why are we interested in this? What is it? What is really very fundamental to what's being said in this book? And I think when we embrace, recognize, know, and feel that we are essentially immortal, it changes everything. To me, that's the key. We as people are very fear-based. We're oriented to survive, and anything that threatens our survival, whether we're aware that we are feeling threatened or we simply feel it, we react in a way that tries to protect ourselves. Well, what are we protecting ourselves from? Ultimately, the idea that we're mortal, as opposed to, that we're immortal. The idea of, the one, it always has been, it always will be. There's a real freedom in that if we're able to incorporate that in our being. That is the antidote to truly anxiety and stress and, holding that. And that can really affect your external life. So that to me is the greatest gift of an approach like this. I mean, I feel that way about other teachings as well that support that very notion. But that is the larger context as I look at these principles.
There's this one idea, and I forget who I got this idea from, but the idea is that if you change your worldview, you literally change reality. And I think that that's like also powerful. For example, if you subscribe to a belief that you are a mortal material being and after our bodies die, that's all we have, and that the universe likewise is mortal and everything is suspect to death and decay, then that's going to be the reality, and that's just going to be what it is. But if you believe yourself to be an immortal soul or spirit or consciousness that lives on infinitely beyond the scope of your material body, and that's also how you see the universe as infinite, unending, life that perpetuates, then that is also going to be the universe. And I think that if you apply that to, you mix the principle of mentalism with the principle of correspondence, and you really see that if you change your inner worldview, if you change the way that you look at life and reality, that literally changes the reality around you, that literally manipulates and changes the external world, then this is a very, very useful principle to contemplate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that even if it doesn't change your external world, I think that it most definitely changes your internal world. When you look at things in a certain way, you color your world by the way you look at things. And the thing that drives it home for me, there was this funny thing that I saw. It was a class somewhere, and I saw this study, and they had a videotape of it. And in the study, it was a young lady. It's an experiment that's going on, but she doesn't know exactly what the experiment is. But it's a young lady who's being taken into a room, and there's three very good-looking fellas sitting in each of the chairs. And the whole thing is that she's going to select one of them based on the way that the fellow kisses. So they blindfold her, and they walk her towards the three fellows, but they actually switch them out, and they put three monkeys. So she kisses each one of the monkeys, and each one of the monkeys actually puckers up and kisses her, and she thinks that she's kissing the one fellow or the other fellow that she saw before she was blindfolded. And she was very happy, and she was content the whole time. And at the end of the thing, they take the blindfold away, and lo and behold, she's really, really surprised. But the study and what they were driving to was that she was really happy until she changed her point of view on what it was that she was doing. So the same thing made her happy and unhappy at the same time. And all of that happened inside of her head, and it was her reality that was being changed by her perception and by what she thought she was doing. So it just was one of those, nuggets of truth that if you look at things in a certain way and you're happy, you're coloring your world with happiness. If you look at the very same thing and you color your world with unhappiness, then your world is very unhappy. And you have an ability to control your world. Now, if I'm in the room with you, you're not really having an effect on my happiness or unhappiness, or as big an effect. You may have an influence, but it won't be the same type of an effect. So you could control your internal world very readily, and the external world, I think you could have some influence on, but not the same degree of control that you have with your internal world. Or at least that's what the study sort of demonstrated to me.
Yeah, the monkeys didn't turn into nice
Not
men.
Those are only frogs, Benjamin, not monkeys.
I mean, I guess this gets to a kind of, like there's a lot of debate and a lot of skepticism around how much we can really influence our external realities. this guy Gordon White I've been into lately, and he's a chaos magician who used to be a statistician. So he's very rational and he's very mathematically minded, and he's been using probability and probability theory to study the effects of magic, and found that actually if you do this stuff, there is things that would seem very improbable do occur, so that you actually can verify scientifically that there can be an effect through our consciousness on the outside world and reality. And he's doing work with that, and I think that it's pretty interesting. I'd love to talk to him on a podcast or something, but yeah, it's like you're not going to turn monkeys into frogs. Like that's just like, there's too much, that reality needs to get too turned for that to happen, but little things that are within greater means of probability, you can affect through your consciousness alone. And there are actually have even been scientific studies now that show that that's possible.
And I think intention is a big part of this, and being mindful and conscious about the power of your mind can greatly alter the way you alter your reality. Instead of just, deceiving a woman with monkeys and nice fellas, it's a different thing, definitely. Yeah. Who was he called? Gordon White?
Yeah, his name's Gordon White, and he's written a bunch of books, and he has a podcast called Rune Soup also, and a blog. But he's got one of the most lucid perspectives on magic that I've heard. Almost, I like a bit of the crazy, because he's too rational for me.
Well, what were his statistics? Do you remember? Because I know Tom Campbell talks about 5%. He threw out that number 5% that we can affect the probability we have. I think he said 5. Do you remember? It was something like that. We could affect the probability, through our thoughts and things. But I also believe that there's an alchemical way we can combine. We don't just have to be like, boo, be my thoughts. This is what I see Jake doing. He's an amazing magician. You're an amazing magician. You use your mind, but you also like affect matter. You don't just beam your thoughts and things move. You beam your thoughts, you have an intention, and then you go about doing the things with your body, physically, and with your understanding of psychology, in getting people to come on your podcast. You know how to talk to them, you know how to get them to feel comfortable and to respond to you and to want to come, and you get your audience and stuff like that, and you're like, people come to your class, but your class isn't beaming thoughts at them. Your class is like taking a paintbrush and real paint and a canvas, and this is how I do this with my body. So you're really combining, and why do we have to pick one or the other? And I believe that if we can affect with our minds 5%, and we can affect with our bodies a certain percent, that's a bigger percent than 5. So we really could, just by changing somebody's mind, by like putting your hand on their arm, like I'm doing here to Ray, that can change him to being angry, to just like something shifts in his mind, and then he feels he feels reassured. I always do this when I notice like some people will bump into people and the person gets really angry and I want to punch you in the face. I'm always like, I'm clumsy. I'm always bumping into people, and I always look them in the eye, and I hold their arm and I say, I'm really sorry. Are you okay? And they smile and they're like, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. And it's like this love fest, and it's a form of magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's my mind and it's my body and it's my intention and it's my love, and it's my asking for forgiveness. It's a humility, that you show. So I believe that we can change our reality. I believe that you've done it. I believe probably everybody in this whole list has done it. I've done it.
We've all done it, and we're all doing it all the time. Can I say one thing?
Yeah,
There's there's a really good quote that I just want to throw out there because I think it's in line with this. It's like, pray to catch the bus, then run as fast as you can.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of like, yeah, like magic is understanding the causality of things, and that everything is born out of intention, and everything is born out of a mental idea first. So you need to get that really, really clear and direct, but you also need to actually do the work in the material universe to realize a particular vision or outcome as well. And magic can kind of help lend support to that, but it's not kind of like, oh, you know, like you won't win the lottery unless you buy a lottery ticket, kind of a thing.
Oh, and then the correspondence, it just occurred to me, if you say as above, so below, you could say as above, like the mind, the literally above, this mind, this brain, so below. So you set the intention up here, and then it flows through your body, and then this, you know, and this work together to create what it is that you want to create.
I also
Exactly.
think we have to move away sometimes from being so concrete. I mean, the thing that we can absolutely change in our reality is our experience in reality. I mean, whether we can transmute, you know, metal into gold is secondary to the idea that if we walk up to the dishes with a belief and a feeling that we hate washing dishes, we will hate washing dishes. That's all there is to it. That's fait accompli, you know. So there is a way to bring a certain consciousness to dishwashing that can be very, very different and have a completely different experience. You know, I always reference the Forrest Gump movie when, you know, as a punishment, he gets sent in to spend the day cleaning the latrine. And he lights up like a child. Like, really? I get, you know, and he has this great experience, you know, and the sergeant is so pissed off because he's trying to punish him. You know, he just brought a different attitude, actually, a different experience. So that's the real shift in our reality. That we have a great deal of influence. I mean, whether we catch the bus or not, we certainly have a great deal of power in terms of changing our experience based on how we think about it, the energy, the intent, all those things.
I'd like to throw in something as well, if I might.
I want to say good night to everybody. I need to go, and I love this. I look forward to getting to
Bye,
know
Dad.
you really well. Thanks, Jake. Love you, Jake. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
I'd like to throw in something very grounding I found on Instagram. He's called Dark Wizard Media. I discovered him
I
through
know
you,
that guy.
Jake. Yeah, and he posts awesome stuff that's really grounding and centering in the reality we are right now in the earth, if you will. And he posted recently something which reads, "Witchcraft isn't just organized spells and ceremonial magic. Magic is talking to your plants and explaining to them why they are being repotted. Magic is wearing your favorite shirt for good luck. Magic is saying thank you to old items before discarding them. Magic is a deep breath and a murmured assurance of, I can do this before a big day. Magic is keeping a candle lit on your desk because you find it relaxing. Magic is throwing open your windows and playing some comforting music. Magic is the little things too." And it's awesome. It's just true, you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, oh, sorry.
No, please.
I'm gonna have to get going soon, but before I left, I kind of wanted to say, if everything sounds like it's very mental, you know, everything is created in our minds, and our minds, we have plasticity. So if you guys have heard of the term, you know, neuroplasticity, being able to change kind of like the chemistry of our brain in order to, you know, to heal, to have a better, just better well-being in general in our lives, and escape from the conditioning. If we need our minds, because in order to be, aligned with the frequency of the energy of everything that is, then we must do whatever we can to protect our mental space. And through, I believe what you were saying, I'm not sure, is your name Salma?
Yeah.
Yeah, what you were saying, it's just a shift in that thought, because we can get, especially nowadays, we can get caught up in such fear, and we're not able to move forward because we are just thinking from the ego. But just honing those mental abilities by shifting those thoughts and just making it grow, because essentially to practice any form of energetic flow that it's positively radiating outwards, it's all about the mind, and it's awesome. So with that, I just want to say good night to everybody because I have to be up early for work. But it's been awesome. It's been
Thanks,
awesome.
Emmeline. Yeah, hope to see you
Yeah.
next week.
Yeah.
Will do. Bye, guys.
Bye. Good night.
So I just wanted to ask you guys, so there's two ways we can do this. If you want, we can talk for another hour or so and try to get through the rest of the 5 principles. Or we could also take it at a slightly slower pace and we could start this conversation again next week with the 3rd principle. And that might, because I know it is quite late where many people are, just can we get kind of like a vote on that? How do you guys feel?
I think we can wait because we lost a lot of people, and it would be nice to have the whole group back again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy
same
with that.
And it's like 1 a.m. here.
Yeah, I know it's super late where you guys are. All right, well, let's do that. So, yeah, it's been, I mean, we can share closing thoughts and stuff like that. It's been awesome to talk with all you guys. And then next week we can jump back in with number 3, the principle of vibration. So there'll be no assigned reading for this next week, unless you want to read ahead, which you're welcome to. It's a pretty short book.
Awesome. Thanks for hosting, Jake. And thanks to everyone for contributing these awesome thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a great group. I'm really happy to be a part of it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, great group. Really impressed by all of your intelligence and ability to articulate these concepts and your high level skills as wizards and witches.
Thank you, guys. I look forward to getting to know you all better and going through this book and hopefully other books after that as well.
And I'm just here on Zoom pretending that I'm wearing pants. not like a pantless crazy person who would do such a thing. Just pantless talking about magic over Zoom.
It's funny.
But yeah, much love, guys. This is super fun. I'm excited to dive more deeply into this, and it's just the beginning too. If we can cover this much depth with only 10 pages, imagine what we're going to do with the whole book, and even beyond that when we get into other books as well.
Do you have an idea of what other books we'll be going into so that I can make sure I have them?
I'm not sure if you were in the voting group. There were like, I think there were 10 or 11 books or something that we all voted on. The 3 books that won, they were tied for first place for what book we would read, were the Kybalion, which won by a huge margin in the second vote. And then there was book 4 by Aleister Crowley, which is kind of like Aleister Crowley's magnum opus, and his writings on magic and meditation and his ideas about Buddhism and stuff like that. And then a book called Condensed Chaos by Phil Hines was the 3rd book that won. But I think that when we'll work through this book first and just see like where things head organically and naturally, because maybe by then there'll be new suggestions, or, you know, we can take a whole nother vote. I actually got the idea for this group by, I did a podcast interview with Lee McCloskey, who's a really incredible artist. And he has a community center in California that's sort of part of the Theosophical Society. and he started just hosting small book club meetings at his house, and it's kind of where his whole community center grew from. And they first did The Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky, which was another book that I put to the vote, and it's kind of like the kind of central book and text on theosophy. So yeah, like I'm not sure. We'll see kind of where things go. I think book 4 could be a cool one to dive into. It's really dense, and it could be cool to have kind of like group support and trying to translate it into a way that's comprehensive for everybody. And also maybe we could go into some of the practices, and we could experiment on our own time and kind of see what results we get from doing it. So book 4 would be a cool one to dive into, but yeah, we'll see after we get through the Kybalion what other books people propose and where things go from there.
800 pages.
Whoa.
Book 4 is 800
Yeah.
pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's like, it's much easier to, I mean, we got through 10 pages in 2 hours. So, you know, I don't know. We'd have to slightly restructure it, I guess. And I'm not sure how we would do that, but it would just drag on for like too long if we were going to go at that pace for a book that size.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Jake, for getting this book club together, because I've been wanting to either join a book club or start a book club since the beginning of the year. And this is just like perfect. So I'm super happy. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really, really fun for me too. Love talking about this stuff, and it's really refreshing to be able to talk about it with all of you. Well, yeah, much love, guys. I guess I'll head out of here soon, and fare thee well, my fellow magicians.
Thank you.
As above, so below.
Good night.
Peace.
Good night, everyone. Peace.
Good night.
Oh, and I'll be posting this soon on my Buzzsprout, so it'll go out on like Spotify and stuff if people want to listen to it again or share it with other people.
Cool.
All right. Peace. Be well.
Peace out.